There we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar series. Today we have a very special webinar, which is the Terrific World of Turtles, presented by the Toronto Island Conservation Program at the Toronto Zoo. Before we get to our presentation today, on your screen, you should be able to see, or maybe if this won't work for me today again, and it's not going to want to. I'll just say you can check out our March events on our calendar at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. There we have a bunch of virtual webinars and also in-person events going throughout March. We have a lot of programs coming up next week for the March break. So please check out our website, the riverwoodconservancy.org/events to register. They do fill up quite quickly, but we just opened a few more spaces. So all of the programs should have spaces now available for you. And if you have the means to support the work that we do, please consider donating at the riverwoodconservancy.org/donate. And before we get to our presentation, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to both live and work on this land. And today we have two very wonderful presenters with us. First up, we have Avalon Carthew, who is a First Nations conservation technician for the Toronto Island Conservation Program at the Toronto Zoo. She has experience volunteering with ecological restoration projects and with children at a local nature center. Avalon is excited to speak with you all today about turtles. And we also have Christine Drader, who is the First Nations Conservation Technician for the Toronto Island Conservation Program at the Toronto Zoo. She works with the Adopt a Pond team in the Blandings Turtle Headstart program and other species at risk fieldwork, outreach, and stewardship. She has her Bachelor in Science degree from the University of Guelph in Biological Sciences and has experience volunteering with Blazing Star Environmental and working with fish and invertebrate species in the Wright Lab. Christine is a Métis individual who is proud to combine her Indigenous heritage with the love for conservation. So welcome to you both. If you have questions for Christine and Avalon today from Turtle Island Conservation, please type them in the comments section and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And if you are watching with your class today, please let us know in the chat bar right now how many students are watching in your class. That would be greatly appreciated. So Avalon and Christine, I will hand it over to you. Miigwech.
All righty, I think everyone can see my screen here. So yeah, we're here from the Turtle Island Conservation Program at your Toronto Zoo, and we're First Nation conservation technicians. My name is Christine Drader, and here is Avalon.
Hi, I'm Avalon. I'm so excited to talk to you today about turtles, and Christine and I are both happy to introduce you all to the terrific world of turtles.
Mm-hmm. So we'll go through a couple different topics, such as just introduction to Ontario's turtles, a story from First Nations perspective of turtles, and then share a little bit about our fieldwork and what we do. So we're going to start with the turtle introduction. You might have already know turtles have been around for millions of years, and they're widely distributed across the world's continents, oceans, and islands with various terrestrial, fully aquatic, and semi-aquatic species. And like all reptiles, they're ectothermic, which means they're cold-blooded, and they can't control their body temperature like we can as mammals and birds. So instead, what they do is they absorb their body heat through their surrounding environment. So in this case, as you can see, there's a little painted turtle in the top right corner. And then from this kind of pictogram, they achieve this regulation by basking. And what you might be thinking is, what are they doing right now in the winter? They go into a state called brumation, which is similar to hibernation. It's a state of inactivity caused by periods of decreased temperatures like we are here. It's very cold. And they're still awake and they can move around. And from this picture, it's kind of hard to see, which is why I did this little pictogram, but this is actually one of our turtles under the ice, and they're free to move around. They're going to be really slow. They cannot survive freezing, so this is why they're under the water. They also can bury in the mud below the frost line, and they'll hibernate in water because their body temperatures remain relatively stable and they don't dip below 0 degrees, so that's freezing. And because it takes a lot of energy for water temperatures to change, most pond or lake bottoms don't actually freeze and they stay the same temperature throughout the cold months. So this is why they're able to stay there. And so as their core body temperature lowers, so does their metabolism. And the colder the turtle gets, the slower the metabolism becomes. So they don't really have to expend a lot of energy, and they're dependent on this stored energy as well as the oxygen in the water to survive. And some are actually able to breathe underwater and through mud through cloacal respiration. So that's actually through their butts, which is a pretty cool thing because basically there's a lot of blood vessels there, and oxygen exchange can happen, and that's how they're able to breathe. However, there's as ice develops over the surface of these waters, oxygen in the water can become limited because it's used up by the species living in it. And as the water becomes less oxygenated, it's called hypoxic, which means low in oxygen, or anoxic, which is there is no oxygen available. And some turtle species can actually live through this, such as snapping turtles or painted turtles, because they change the way their metabolism works for a short period of time. Essentially, they will use the calcium that's found in their shell and their skeleton to neutralize lactic acid building up in their body, because that's what's created from the lack of oxygen. And then when they come out of hibernation, their bodies feel like a big muscle cramp because they have this acid buildup. And to counteract this, they bask back in the sun in the springtime. And as their body temperature increases, their metabolism kicks in, and then all that lactic acid is able to disappear and dissipate. So you might be wondering, what are our turtle species? So we have 8 species of turtles. Unfortunately, they are all species at risk. This is under the label from the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. And here are the 8 turtles. There's the wood turtle, northern map turtle, eastern musk turtle, spotted turtle, Blanding's turtle, snapping turtle, painted turtle, and spiny softshell turtle. And if you want to learn more about these individual species, Adopt Upon, which is a program that we also work with, has guides online, or you can also download our Adopt Upon app, as well as there's a website called Ontario Nature that can tell you all about these fun little guys. But I thought I would focus on 4 species that might be near you in the Riverwood Conservancy area. So that would be the Blanding's turtle, the Midland painted turtle, the northern map turtle, the snapping turtle, and there's one introduced species, which is the red-eared slider. And so this is a picture from Ontario Nature, the website. It's the Reptile and Amphibian Atlas. And here we have the painted turtle, and it's a relatively common turtle compared to the rest of the ones. It's still at risk, but it can be found in our area in the Rouge Natural Urban Park, as well as around the Riverwood Conservancy. And we're probably most likely you're going to see the Midland painted turtle and the snapping turtle because the northern map turtle and Blanding's turtle are at like a higher threatened range, and they have dwindling populations. And the red-eared slider is not a turtle native to Ontario. It's often mistaken for the painted turtle. And up in this top right corner is actually one of the ambassador red-eared sliders from the Riverwood Conservancy. They have 5 turtles there, and I learned about them. And I thought I'd include this photo because you can see just how similar it might look to the native painted turtle. The difference is from its name, the red ear. As you can see in the painted turtle, it's still yellow and there's no red, as well as they're quite a lot bigger compared to painted turtles. And they're being increasingly found in our wetlands and waterways as pets that have been abandoned by people no longer able to take care of them or willing to take care of them. And they can actually, unfortunately, compete for resources with our native species, such as for basking spots, food resources, nesting sites, and overwintering. And as I said, since they're larger in size, they can be quite bullies and bully the smaller painted turtles off from these basking spots. As well as if you ever introduce a species into an area that they're not supposed to be in, this can pose the risk of introducing disease into ecosystems, and that can affect the whole ecosystem and a variety of species. And all our local turtles are species at risk, so this really increases further risk to their populations. So definitely, I would say, please do your research before adopting a pet. Never abandon it in the wild. And then there is a organization called Little Rescue, and it's a charity reptile rescue in Ontario, and it actually specializes in red-eared sliders. So if that's of interest to you, definitely check that one out. And so turtles are, as I mentioned, are unfortunately species at risk here. And this is under the Committee of the Endangered, on the status of endangered wildlife in Canada. And there's 7 status categories. So as you can see, there's data deficient. That just means there's not enough available information able to assess this species. Not at risk, which is what we want. We don't want anyone to be at risk. Special concern means that there are species living in the wild, but they're not endangered or threatened. However, they could reach that level if we don't take any factors and steps to address it. Threatened is the next level, which is it's not endangered, but it will become endangered if we don't do any steps. Then there's endangered. And then extirpated means that it does live somewhere else in the world, but at one time it lived in the wild, for example, in Ontario, but no longer lives in the wild in Ontario. And then extinct means it's no longer on the world at all. And turtles, their most significant threats are due to the loss or fragmenting of their wetland habitats. And this can be from development projects or construction, as well as road mortality from cars, and as well as predation on eggs, which I haven't listed here because this is a natural occurrence. However, in areas of urbanization, like we have in the Rouge National Urban Park, human activities such as feeding animals in the wild or not properly disposing of garbage can create higher predator populations, and this is called subsidized predation. And then as well as illegal collection for pet trade is also a very serious threat to our turtle species. They are slow breeders. They don't start to lay eggs until they're in their teens or 20s. So definitely any death of adults and of adults from breeding age can have a huge impact on the species. So next I'm going to pass it along to Avalon, and she's going to tell us a story.
Hi everyone, I'm so happy to share this story with you today. It's told by many people in many Indigenous groups in Ontario. It's told by Ojibwe and Haudenosaunee people, and it's called Sky Woman and Turtle Island. And maybe you've heard of the term Turtle Island before, but you don't know about Sky Woman. So I'll be sure to tell you all about her. So a long time ago, the world was a very different place. And there was actually a realm in the sky where people lived, and they were like us, but different because they lived up in the clouds, and they were called sky people. And then one day, a pregnant woman named Sky Woman was out foraging. She was looking for seeds and berries and medicine plants to gather to tend to her health during her pregnancy and for her family. And unfortunately, she slipped through the big roots of a tree and fell through this giant hole and fell to earth. And the earth back then wasn't as we know it today. It was quite different. And the earth was just entirely covered in water, and there was no land. But luckily for Sky Woman, some birds saw her falling, and they could tell she clearly needed some help. She didn't have any wings. So they gathered around her, and they used their tiny little claws and their beaks and their strong wings, and they formed a net around her to keep her aloft in the air so that she didn't fall into the water. However, these despite how ambitious these birds were, and they were very ambitious and they really wanted to help Sky Woman, it just wasn't possible for them to keep her aloft in the air forever. And they didn't know what to do. But luckily, one really intelligent bird volunteered and said, well, I'll go to the surface of the water and I'll let the other animals know what's happening. Maybe someone has some wisdom to share with us about this situation. Unfortunately for those birds, not a single animal had ever experienced anything like this before at all. Not only had they never seen a human, of course, but they had certainly never heard of any sort of being falling from the sky. So they were all, really shocked and definitely at a loss for what to do. But finally, a turtle that had been pondering this for quite a while spoke up and said, well, birds, you need to rest, but you can place Sky Woman back on my shoulder. And the bird said, thank you, turtle. And they put Sky Woman back of the. And again, all of these animals were, of course, curious about Sky Woman. They had never seen a human before, so they were just curious about her, and they watched her with great interest. And they looked at her and they knew she didn't have any fur to keep herself warm. She didn't have webbed feet to swim. She didn't have sharp teeth to defend herself or hunt food for herself. So they knew that she would need some help to survive, and she seemed really quite vulnerable. So all these creatures wanted to help her. With Sky Woman, in addition to being pregnant, she also wasn't alone in a different way. And she opened her hands to reveal that she had seeds with her that she had gathered. And with these plants, she could grow food. But what she needed was land to be able to do this. But how do you make land? Well, we're going to find out. And then a beaver volunteered to dive deep down to the water to get mud to make this land. And the beaver swam deep and strong as he could. But unfortunately, he floated up back to the surface without any mud. Then an otter said, I'll go, I can swim farther and deeper than that beaver. And so she swam even deeper and with all of her might, but unfortunately, that otter didn't make it either. Finally, a tiny little voice piped up and said, I'll do it, I'll get the mud. And it was the voice of this tiny little muskrat. And muskrats are much smaller than a beaver or an otter. And this particular muskrat, which, kind of scraggly, she seemed like really, she wasn't up to this task, but she had a real fire in her eyes, and she was filled with ambition and inner strength. And, the other animals, they eventually rallied behind her. And so this muskrat, she swam deep and deep and deep into the water, and she grabbed a ball of mud in her tiny little paws, and she swam to the surface, and finally her tiny little muskrat paw broke the surface of the water with a piece of mud. And all the animals, they were so excited that someone had succeeded in getting mud. That was so important. And the muskrat gave the mud to Sky Woman, who spread the mud on the turtle's back, and it stretched into land. And the turtle kept growing and growing. And that's how Turtle Island was formed. And then Sky Woman used the seeds that she had with her to plant this land with all sorts of medicines and plants that we know and love today, like cedar, sage, and strawberries. And I know it might sound kind of strange, but this story, in a way, is actually true. And I'm going to tell you how and why it's true. So in this creation story that I just shared with you, the world as we know it wouldn't be possible if that turtle didn't make a big sacrifice. And wetlands as we know today, they're not possible without turtles either. So in nature, turtles are what we call a keystone species, and that's sort of like an organism that acts like the glue that holds a habitat or ecosystem together. And another keystone species that we just heard about is actually the muskrat. So every animal has its own role in the world. And turtles have many roles, And one of their roles is that they act as the cleanup crew or the janitors of the wetlands, and they do this through their diet. So they actually eat dead plants and animals, which may not be very appetizing to us, but to turtles, that's a delicious taste treat. And when turtles eat these dead plants and animals, they're actually removing a source of harmful bacteria that could hurt other animals. And turtles are also predators, so they eat all sorts of much smaller creatures like fish and insects and snails even. And that allows them to control the populations of these prey animals. And it doesn't stop there, because turtle hatchlings and eggs are even an important food source for other animals. So in this way, turtles fulfill multiple links in the food chain. And turtles have another special role. So if you like gardening in your backyard or in a local community garden, well, you have something in common with a turtle. So turtles actually act as gardeners. So when turtles move from wetland to wetland, they bring something very special with them in the form of nutrients, also known as fertilizer or their poo. So as turtles go throughout their busy turtle days and they go to the bathroom, they're actually spreading nutrients around in the form of nitrogen and potassium, and that can actually help plants grow big and strong. But it doesn't stop there, because when turtles eat aquatic plants like white water lilies, they end up consuming the seeds of those plants as well, and then throughout their day excreting those seeds. And the seeds that they leave behind them in their droppings have actually been known to germinate or grow. So turtles can actually help grow various plants. So the world, as we know, would be very different without turtles. They have a special role to play that only they can do. And much like the turtle in the story of Sky Woman and Turtle Island, turtles are also home to various forms of life, including leeches, those aquatic worms that we all know and love. So leeches actually feed off of turtles, but they also even live on turtles. And there's a special leech called the smooth turtle leech that will live on a host turtle until the leech is old enough to have its first delicious meal of blood, and then that leech will leave its turtle host and go off and live its adult life. It doesn't stop there though. In this image, you'll see a painted turtle basking like how Christine described, but you'll see some algae on his shell as well. And this algae will grow on a turtle's carapace, but it also provides camouflage for the turtle, in addition to acting as a home for various tiny little aquatic insects. And interestingly enough, in Australia, there's a turtle called the Crufts River turtle, and there's a special type of algae that's almost exclusively found on turtle shells in Australia. So that's really quite something, that this algae would be much harder to find if it wasn't for turtles. So turtle shells can also act as a calendar. So in the middle of the turtle's shell in this image, you'll see 13 shells, or what we call scutes, on its carapace. And along the edge of its shell, you'll see 28 marginal scutes. And the 13 scutes actually represent 13 moons, and that's 12 moons for 12 months of the year, with one extra moon for what's called the blue moon, and that's the second full moon within a calendar month. So that's very special. And this chart will show the English month names, and then the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee names for the different moons, as well as their meaning. So right now it's March, and that's known as the sugar-making moon. And so hopefully we've inspired you so far to think about turtles, but maybe you're concerned about them because after all, they are species at risk. But no matter who you are or how old you are, you can be the seed of change to fight extinction, and you can actually have a positive impact on not only just turtles, but the world around you. And I'm going to show you how. So if you like getting outdoors, you can definitely go volunteer with the Parks and Forestry Department in Mississauga, and you could do invasive species removal and plant native plants and do garbage cleanup. Or you can volunteer with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, doing things like trail maintenance or even more invasive species removal and planting of native trees and shrubs. So another really fun and engaging thing to better the world is to participate in something called a shoreline cleanup. And this summer, Christine and I actually participated in multiple shoreline cleanups. We did 4 in Indigenous communities and even one in Toronto for urban Indigenous youth. And because we were all so determined and we had a common goal, together we managed to collect 500 pounds of waste, which is an amazing accomplishment. And you might be wondering what's happening in this photo. So in this photo, you'll see a staff and volunteer using a sieve. And that's sort of like in your kitchen, how you sift flour. And imagine that, but on a larger scale. And this sieve is being used to sift through sand and to expose any microplastics that are within. And unfortunately, microplastics are like teeny weeny pieces of plastic that are polluting the world. But maybe you really love technology and going outside. Well, there's something for you to do as well. And we have lots of really wonderful citizen science apps. And one of them is called Frog Watch, and that app will allow you to record any sightings of frogs or toads you may see in Ontario. And we also have Turtle Tally, which will allow you to record any sightings of turtles that you see. And maybe you don't feel confident in your identification abilities, that's totally fine, because the app will definitely help you work on those skills, and the information that you provide will help scientists know where we can find these animals. And in the middle, you'll see the icon for a really special app called Clam Counter, and that's actually to identify mussels. And in Ontario, we have 41 species of mussels, and unfortunately, 65% of these mussels are endangered. And that's really horrible, because mussels can live for up to 100 years, and they spend their days filtering water, and that's such an important job that they do. So really, they need all the help that they can get from us. And the last app that's really fun is called iNaturalist, and it's not limited to just frogs or turtles or mussels. You can identify like a tree or a fungi or an insect. And if you're not quite sure of what you're looking at, well, one of their community members will be glad to help you identify it. And everyone really is quite friendly on iNaturalist, and they love to help people learn new things. But perhaps you're artistically inclined, and that's great as well, because art can also be a very powerful tool to express a positive message about conservation. And in this image here, you'll be looking at a bumper sticker. This is designed by Heather from Georgina Island, which is where we had one of our shoreline cleanups this summer. And it says, "I break for snakes" in English. So it has a positive message in English and in Anishinaabe about taking care when you're driving. And if you can, stop safely, to stop if you see a snake. So I'm going to pass you along to Christine, who will talk about turtle monitoring. Take it away, Christine.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about our field work that we do at the Toronto Zoo, and this is with the Adopt Pond program as well as Turtle Island Conservation. And so basically, the purpose of monitoring is just to restore the Blandings turtle population within the Rouge National Urban Park and its neighboring watersheds, and confirm the success and inform the future of our headstarting program. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then our secondary purposes is to monitor wild Blandings turtle populations and other turtle populations. And then we use this information to inform habitat use, seasonal movement behavior, which can then be used in various planning conservation planning. So examples of monitoring, today I'm going to talk to you about radio telemetry. However, Adopt-A-Pond also does other turtle monitoring activities such as hoop net trapping, which is the top right here. This is a snapping turtle that was caught in the hoop nets. And they are set out twice a day and checked twice a day and then brought up. So there's no risk to catching them for having them trapped in the nets for too long. They are, and then they're brought up on weekends, so they'll definitely be checked throughout. And basically, we take these obviously very happy snapping turtles and we'll measure them, take measurements. They have notch codes, which are little indentations on the shell that tell us a unique individual, and then behavior, GPS points, things like that. And we're just collecting information to figure out what's out there, the ages of the turtles, and how many turtles are being caught in these traps. And then we also do nesting surveys, which is held in June during the nesting period. And primarily we're walking along sites looking for nesting turtles, evidence of nesting. This could include, unfortunately, holes that have been predated on, and we're recording this information. And if we do come across a nest, a predated nest that might have valuable eggs, or an actively nesting turtle, we'll watch, wait until it's done what it's doing. And if it was a Blandings turtle, we will collect the eggs. If it's other turtle species, we call Parks Canada and they'll make the decision to either put a nesting protector, which is what's in the photo here, which will allow protect the hatchlings and the eggs from being predated on, and then it'll give enough room for the hatchlings to kind of dissipate, or it'll be removed and constantly watched to make sure they can get out. Or Parks Canada will also collect the eggs, and we'll collect the eggs, incubate them, and once they hatch, then they're released back into the location that they're found. So this is just to kind of give them a better chance and reduce the risk of predation to these eggs. And lastly, we do road mortality surveys for we record any animals that we see. Of course, we'll help anything that we see. We've had those a few times where I've helped multiple snakes and some turtles cross the road. And this is to collect data, and this can be used to inform management practices and identify these kind of hotspots where road mortality is occurring. So our Blandings turtles, they have a bright yellow chin, this domed carapace, yellow flecks on the shell. The carapace is the top of the shell, the plastron is the bottom of the shell, and a hinged plastron. That means that they can close all the way up. So this turtle is pretty happy. He's out and about, but if it did feel threatened by us, it can actually pull its legs in and its head in and completely shut its shell so it can't be reached. And these guys live in shallow wetlands with clean water and mucky bottoms, and they are at risk of poaching specifically, and then as well as for the illegal pet trade, because fortunately they look adorable, and that can be a reason why. And these other turtles that we find amongst our travels in the Rouge National Urban Park, very similar to what I said earlier about the Riverwood Conservancy, are the painted turtle. This is a little baby that I found, and the snapping turtle and the map turtle. And as I mentioned before, they all face risk of habitat loss, road mortality, and poaching. So radio telemetry, we have our Head Start program. Each year, turtle eggs are collected with permits from a stable source population within Ontario. These eggs are brought back to the Toronto Zoo, where they're incubated, hatched, and raised for 2 years until they're about the size of a wild 4 to 5 year old turtle. And at this size, their shells are large enough to evade most predators, such as raccoons, skunks, foxes, coyotes, crows, and this gives them a better head start, hence the name, in life than hatchlings. So here we have a picture of the hatchlings that we've had. And then below is actually the release that we did in 2021. This is one of the turtles that we released. And in this process of incubation, hatching, and their first year of growth, this can all be viewed by the public at the Toronto Zoo in the Americas Pavilion. And then once they reach the second year, they the new hatchlings come in, and those guys get moved to the Wildlife Health Center. So they'll be unavailable to be seen, but still working hard. And once they reach 2 years of age, they're released within specially picked locations in Rouge National Urban Park. And our team works with Parks Canada to select the most suitable locations prior to release day. And after release, our work is certainly not over. We track the released turtles' movement and survival through radio telemetry. So you might be asking, what is radio telemetry? And it uses radio signals. That's, again, hence the name. It's pretty simple, to determine the location of an animal being tracked. As demonstrated by our coworker Lisa here, you need a receiver, which is kind of the box being held to her ear, an antenna, which is the metal thing, and a cord connects the two, and which amplifies the sound. That's what the antenna is doing. And basically, these tiny little transmitters are attached. They're about maybe the size of a coin, to the about half of the released headstart's shells. This is a painless process. Their shell is very hard. They don't feel it at all, and it doesn't hinder the juveniles from their normal activities. And so using the receiver, we can pick up a signal or a beep, which is louder the closer you get to the turtles. And we do this in the rain, shine, or snow. So here we have Lisa just a month ago tracking, and as you can see, it's all iced over and they're in their overwintering spots. So we track and locate these turtles up to 3 times a week, and we record information about their location, habitat, movement pattern, and well-being. We're marking if there's any sort of injury or anything. And we adjust our tracking frequency depending on the season and the movement of the turtles. So in the summer, they're very exploratory. We're tracking more frequently. That's up to that 3 times per week. But in the winter months, they're overwintering. They're not moving much, as I had mentioned earlier in the presentation. So we actually only track them once a month, and we're just making sure that they're still in the same location. And in addition, we actually track wild adult females that have been discovered in the Rouge National Urban Park, because they are of adult age and they're able to potentially nest. And so all the data here helps to improve our understanding of survival and habitat use. And we're definitely excited when these headstarts reach of age. Right now, our oldest headstarts are going to be 10 this year, and our oldest tracked headstart is 9. And so Blanding's turtles might, it kind of depends, but they don't reach maturity until anywhere from 15 to into their 20s. So we're still a few years away from maybe observing nesting behaviors, but definitely the information provided can be used for park managers to create or restore suitable wetlands where these aquatic animals can thrive. So I'd like to talk about kind of a story about a second chance, about one of the adult turtles that have come into our study, and this is Lady Cordelia. We had another presentation with some volunteers for our Turtle Tally and Frog Watch app, and we told her story like I'm about to tell you today, and we actually had a naming kind of contest where people submitted names, and ultimately they named her Lady Cordelia. So she used to be referred to as the OTCC turtle, but now she has a name. And in 2019, Parks Canada had found her after unfortunately being hit on the road by a vehicle. But they were able to take her in, and she stayed at the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, and that's the OTCC, for treatment from 2019 to 2020. She was treated for her injuries, but she wasn't eating well. She began eating again near the end of 2020, and then they gave her the winter to catch up on feeding, as well as there's just no point in releasing her while it's overwintering season. And then in June 2021, she was given us to release back into the Rouge National Urban Park. She was released where she was found, because you should never take a wild animal away from the location, and then if you release them into a completely new location, they won't adjust to necessarily where they are. So we have to release them back where we find them. So if you ever find an animal injured, it's great to record exactly where you found it and give it to whatever wildlife rehab or animal control or anything that you're contacting so that they know where exactly this animal is found. And as some post-release updates, she had a successful release. Here's a little short video on us releasing her that day. She absolutely is a happy gal and she loves the mud. Unfortunately, we do check on the turtles and sometimes make sure that we see them in person, not too often as not to disturb them, but she was in the mud for a while, so we dug her out. And this is the picture that we got digging her out, and she absolutely loves it, perhaps just to stay out of the sun. But she scared us a little bit. She went on the move temporarily. However, don't worry, she's back in the pond and she's been in her overwintering spot since. So I actually made a map, a simple map showing our tracked locations throughout time. And as you can see from release day, she explored a bit of her pond, but ultimately she kind of favors this bottom right area of the pond. And for a while, she was, as I mentioned, she consistently was found in deep mud and probably sheltering herself from the hot summer heat. But in October was when she decided to go explore about half a kilometer away from the main pond, away from water. And this is usually the time the turtles are settling down to overwinter. So she was worried, we were worried she was traveling away, perhaps not quite content with her spot. But this only happened for about a week. We tracked her a number of times just to make sure we weren't going to lose her. And she decided to head back in the pond, and she's remained in this area since. And I do want to note that if she chose to go to a different waterway using a river system or going to different ponds, we wouldn't stop her. She's completely wild. She's free to move as she pleases. We do love to make sure she's all right and take data, but ultimately her well-being comes first. And we look forward to tracking her movement and seeing where she heads off next. And so if you'd like to read more about her story, we made a blog post about it on the Adopt a Pond blog. You can find other things that we've written as from Turtle Island Conservation. We use this blog as well. And as well as if you want to hear more information specifically about the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, you can check out ontarioturtle.ca. And then as well as check us out at Adopt a Pond Facebook or the blog, or as well as the Toronto Zoo website and search Adopt a Pond or Turtle Island Conservation. So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine and Avalon. Thank you for all of that really important information, the natural and cultural importance of turtles. And a huge shout out goes to you guys too. That is a lot of work. I know field season is hard work, and just thank you so much for putting in so much effort to protect our turtle friends, because they are the cutest things ever. And it's just, those stories just make me smile. So we did have a couple questions come in. It looks like from students. So to start, Aiden would like to know what happens if the tracking device falls off of the turtles.
Yeah, so that does happen. Occasionally they will, because they're not meant to be permanent. We replace them every year. So occasionally that might happen if we're not replacing them close enough to the end of the year, it'll fall off. And unfortunately, we lose that turtle from the study. That does not mean that the turtle is lost in the wetland. It's just happy to be wild. So that is unfortunate for our research purposes, but it's totally fine for the turtle. And we have found transmitters dropped. And we just collect them, take them out of the wetland. Otherwise, they're replaced. So it really doesn't happen that often.
Awesome, thank you. Evan would like to know, how does a turtle shell form and grow?
So turtle shells, they actually grow with the turtle. And when you look at a turtle shell and you see the scales or scutes, the turtle will actually shed those scutes as the shell grows. And they're made of about 50 bones, including the rib cage and spine of the turtle. So a turtle can never leave its shell. It needs its shell.
And an interesting thing as well is, so if I have my hand here and we have the little scoots along the side, and we'll put a notch code because there's 12 on each side. So it can be used as an ID. So for example, if you did on the, this might be backwards, but let's say on the left side, you notched it at 1 and 4, that would be 1 comma 4 dash, let's say 8. And I always thought it was weird when we had our little head starts, because they're growing so fast, that I was like, why are people putting the notches so close to the side? It's so hard to read. But it's because when they grow out radially. So the notch will move to the side. I realized I was getting mad at my coworkers for nothing. It's just a natural part of the growing turtle.
Awesome. And I guess kind of a follow-up question to that, Layla wants to know why turtles even need shells in the first place.
Yeah, so turtles need shells as a way of defending themselves. You might look at a turtle and you kind of notice, well, mostly they don't have any teeth at all. And they're not exactly, especially, I mean, they can move quite quickly, but they're not known for their speed like a peregrine falcon. So they have to defend themselves by hiding in their shell. And if you've ever seen a snapping turtle and you look at its plastron or the bottom part of its shell, you see it's quite small, and that a snapping turtle cannot squeeze itself entirely into its shell. That's why snapping turtles, in order to defend themselves, instead of hiding in their shell, they need to snap or bite.
Thank you, Avalon. A question from Mateo, and I think this is kind of a story that's usually told, but if a turtle is hatching on a beach, does it follow the light of the moon?
Now, that's not exactly how our turtles do it in Ontario, because that's how sea turtles do it. But I have heard that before. And unfortunately, I have heard that it can be a problem when there's like street lights, because they'll get confused and they'll go towards the street light. So I know that's been an issue with conservation where sea turtles are. But that's not how our Ontario turtles kind of do it. But it is, I believe there is a truth in that.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll take a couple more questions if both of you are okay with that, because we do have some coming in now. Andrew would like to know, how long can turtles live? And I know this kind of varies, but maybe speak particularly to the turtles that you focus on.
Yeah, so they can live, like you had said, it varies on the species. It's not quite known, but I would say probably, well, so we have a ambassador animal as well. His name is Captain Sunshine, and he is about, it's unknown exactly what his age is, but I want to say he's about in his 60s. And that is getting into an older age, and I'd say it could probably be anywhere from 80 to 100 is their lifespan. But it's kind of funny how it's unknown with these turtles. And then older turtles, there's big, I guess it's a tortoise, the Galapagos tortoises, they can be even upwards. I think the oldest one I want to say is 180 years old. So well past a human lifespan, which again makes it very important that when you maybe want to look into them as a pet, you have to understand that's a lifetime of commitment. And potentially pass through generations, because they can reach such old ages.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Christine. And actually, we at Riverwood, all of our 5 red-eared sliders, they're all adopted. So we never bought one from a pet store, but we're all assuming that people probably bought them when they were this big, and now they are like this big and bigger. Our biggest one, Lady, is like this big, and she's in her 50s. So definitely consider researching turtles. I would say they are not the greatest pets, but you can definitely enjoy protecting them in the wild.
I agree. I love our turtles, and I love seeing them in the wild where they're meant to be. And they can be quite stinky, and we clean them out very frequently. We feed them and clean the ones on site 3 times a week, which might be a lot more than someone at home might be able to do, because we have special tanks that can just drain out all the water without obviously draining out the turtles. And so, yeah, they can be quite stinky. So I wouldn't recommend them as a pet.
No, and I am in the same boat as you, Christine. I'm also scrubbing tanks at work, and so are a lot of our education teams. So we kind of take turns on cleaning the tanks, and it is very stinky, and you are covered in poo after cleaning it out. So another consideration when getting a pet. Couple more questions here. Can you share the name of the species of snakes that are able to actually eat turtles? Is there a species of snake that eats turtles?
I would say primarily this isn't occurring when they're adults. This is occurring when they're hatchlings, and anything that can fit its mouth around the hatchlings, really. So I can't think of the top of my head, but bigger species, there's water snakes. There's the queen snake in Ontario. There's, I don't think a garter snake would be able to get it. They can be a little bit on the smaller side, but snakes do have that ability to open their mouths quite a lot larger than they look. So definitely, I think if there was interest, they might go after it. But stuff like the red bellies, the brown snakes that are really common in the areas that we're in, they wouldn't be able to get it because they're just like these little guys. So
like the size of a worm sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll take one more question and then we'll let you guys go. Marcus in grade 3 would like to know how many, if any, turtles have gone extinct, maybe in the world.
So I can't say off the top of my head just how many turtles have gone extinct, but unfortunately turtles do go extinct due to reasons like habitat loss, poaching, and poaching is when people will take animals from the wild and maybe keep them as a pet or sell their body parts for medicinal purposes, or even take turtle eggs from the wild. And all that adds up to, that can definitely add up to extinction, and it's really quite terrible. That's why it's important that we have these wonderful conservation efforts, and then everyone knows that you can have a positive impact on the world and be the seed of change in your own neighborhood where you live, and just do something good and then inspire someone else to take care of the world and be that steward of the earth as well.
That's wonderful, Avalon. Thank you.
And yeah, just to add on, I know that more than half the world's turtles at this moment are threatened with extinction, and turtles and tortoises. And there have been species in the past that have gone extinct. I can't tell you the exact number. Luckily in Ontario, from our knowledge, currently there is none that are in that extirpated or extinction level, but there are a few turtles that are in the endangered level. And I know the spotted turtle nearly went extinct. I think back in the 90s because of illegal pet trade, and they were being taken because they're quite cute. They're a cute little turtle. They have spots, and they were being taken from the wild. And from conservation efforts, it's getting better, which is good. And they were at one, they were less than 100 individuals in the wild, known individuals.
Wow. And I guess just a follow up, my own curiosity for, contributing to citizen science like iNaturalist, and you were to find something that was out of the ordinary, like a wood turtle or a spotted turtle. What are the recording suggestions for that? Like, would that information be valuable, and should that be protected information so not to expose where they are?
Definitely. So for example, our app as well as iNaturalist, you can submit that, but the results, what they can do in mapping software is they can show you a general area, and the closer you go into the map, the less detail it'll show. So it won't show the exact location of the individuals. And they do this, I think, for multiple species, but primarily the spotted turtles, the wood turtles, these threatened species in Ontario, they are not widely shared, and the locations aren't widely shared. So there are conservation efforts doing that, but it's kind of private because of those reasons. But if you saw one in the wild, definitely for those types of apps, share it there, because that is valuable knowledge. But definitely don't be sharing it online on social media.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess that's really important too, so that poachers can't find direct places where they actually can find these turtles, right? So that's really important as well when becoming a citizen scientist. So I think that's all we have today. I just want to say thank you and miigwech to Christine and Avalon for joining us today. Thank you so much for all of your information, your stories, and spreading awareness about our turtles as well. And I hope to see you both in the future, maybe after your very busy spring season that's upcoming in the field. But good luck with everything. Thank you so much. And to everybody that is watching today as well, thank you for joining. And hopefully you have some turtle stories that you want to share with us. And hopefully you go out there and protect some turtles as well. So thank you, both of you, and have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, miigwech.